Okay, any point in time, you need to stop me and ask me a question. Please feel free. And yeah, let's is there any class today? Okay. So, this session talks about how to identify and justify your topic for research. So, as I said, that you might have several topics in mind. You might have, let's say, you might have scrolled through some topics and one might be very close to your heart, but it's not doable because it needs a lot of resources. The other might be in your mind, but then it's not timely. So it's not something that you want to urgently see or you want to utilize your resources on it. You might have some other topic that is in your mind or has been in your mind for some time and you want to try it, but then you go and research it and you find a lot of material on it or a lot of publications on it, and then you're disheartened. So we would want you to focus on a topic that is relevant and you're able to justify why are you doing this research within health and social care. So within this learning objective, so you will be considering the potential impact of your research. So what you're going to do, you're going to use evidence that has been published already. Now, what that means is that research has been done in, it might, you might not have come across that research probably, but then we will tell you what strategies you can use to have proper research, and then you have an evidence base that there is this existing gap and this is what you would want to look at in order to conduct your research. And then you would want to identify what participants are you going to use. Are you going to use children in your studies? Are you going to use adults in your studies? Are you going to sample a certain population? Or are you taking the whole population, which is obviously not possible for this course? And then ethical considerations. What questions are you asking? Are those questions confidential in nature? If yes, what are your plans to maintain that confidentiality? What statements are you giving there? And then you develop a timeline for your research. Now, timelines are very important because they keep you within your limits. So you're not doing the research for years and years, you're just doing it within a specified time. And then you're presenting your evidence, whatever evidence you've gathered from your research that is then contributing to the society or to the health and social care sector. Your aims and objectives, why are you doing this research? And you need to understand the methods. What methods are you using? So these methods, you may use methods that have been used previously for another research project, maybe somewhere else in the country, in the world, and you might want to replicate. So that is what replicability means, or reproducibility means. So if you're doing some research that has been done already, if you're doing it in exactly the same way, are you getting the same results as the previous research got? And if you're not, then either there's some flaw in the previous research, which you are making as well, you're making the same mistake, or that sample that was researched was a different sample compared to yours. So the methods might be correct, what they used, you might be using the same methods, but your samples are different. So that can happen, and that is okay. So if you've taken some methods from a study that sampled adults, and you're using those methods for children or for adolescents or older age groups, You might have different results, but then the methods are the same, then it's okay. Permissions, approvals, do you need any from your organization where you're working, or from people who you're taking the data from? Consent, their confidentiality, anonymity. So people might not want to use their names. They might not want their names being highlighted. Well, what are you how are you making sure that would happen? How are you telling them that they will you will make sure so that they, whatever opinions they have. Yesterday we talked about qualitative research. So if they want to give you some opinion, it's free from any bias. They're not threatened that this information will go out with their names. So yeah, we're going to talk about your understanding of research, your purposes, your aims, objectives, need for accuracy, focus and time management, recording, reporting, and analysis. So what's the importance of, we talked about this yesterday, sorry. Yeah, so why is research important in health and social care? This was talked about yesterday. There are these 4 or 5 main objectives. I'll just get to them. Just a minute. Yeah. So it's to diagnose disease earlier and more accurately. Either you want to do that, or you want to provide life-changing treatments, or you want to prevent people from actually developing those conditions so that they don't require lifelong treatments. You want to improve health and care for the generations to come, or you want to ensure everyone has a better quality of life. Your aims could be all of these or just one of these. You might not be able to actually produce a huge research that would have such a big impact because your course time is very short. You're not doing it for years and years. It's not it's not a prospective study or cohort study where you're using thousands of people for your research at this time. But this research project, when you do it, it might be your first research project, and then you can do the next one that actually makes this big, huge difference. So we train you in that way to do that bigger project. So we've had a look at this this video. I'll just share this video once again so that it's just a reminder that what happens when there's no research, or what was the case when there was no research.
Our healthcare was like before it. Let's imagine what our healthcare was like before it was based on research. This isn't too hard to imagine, for it wasn't that long ago that all medical care was based on folklore and speculation, and for centuries before that on little more than magic and superstition. Our forebears had many questions, but they didn't have the hard evidence that allowed them to answer them, and in turn to make good decisions for their patients. Without clinical research, healthcare is in some ways a guessing game. Of course, with experience, practitioners can learn through trial and error which treatment might be most appropriate, but surely there is a better way. And as well as looking backwards, why not imagine a future where there is no more research? What would medical care be like there? Again, this is an easy thing to imagine, for if clinical research were to stop today, the healthcare of the future would be exactly as it is today. No new treatments, no new ways of alleviating pain or suffering, no new ways to prevent disease. Healthcare would in effect be frozen in time, for it's only through the discovery associated with clinical research that we move forward. Although medical care in the 21st century is remarkable, especially if we compare it even to the recent past, I think we all realise that it isn't perfect. There are still conditions that cause great suffering. There are still diseases that we struggle to treat effectively, and some of the treatments we do use may cause unpleasant or unacceptable side effects. We all want healthcare to progress and improve, both for ourselves and for the next generations. Clinical research is the engine that will drive that progress forward.
Okay. That's really alarming.
Are you having trouble trying to keep...
Sorry. And then when we talk about clinical research that is not there, it becomes your and our responsibility to actually do that if we have the ability. So anyone who has the ability to do research and to make a change, they should do that. So, okay. So how do we agree to a research topic? Now you're all geared towards, um, you're in the best position to right now talk about your research, but how do you go and choose your topic that you would want to do um, your research on? So okay, I'll stop sharing this screen and I'll start sharing my screen again to show you all the research topics that we can browse through. Please let me know if my screen is visible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yes.
Claude, so if I ask you, so there's several topics that you can have your research on. So you can have your research on anything that inspires you, anything that excites you with regards to research, if you would want any idea. I'm scrolling through this just so that it gives you, for instance, I'm really interested in public health because I basically I am a public health practitioner. So for me, I would want to see understanding inclusive growth and health in practice, for instance, or topics for research such as the effects of alcohol and mental health problems on employment outcomes. So there's several projects that you can do within public health, but then you have to see whether your project would be actually ending at the time when this course ends or not. So you would want, that would be your primary aim. So if we're talking about anything that inspires you, thought anything?
Yeah, of course. Sure, I can choose anyone, but it's fine. I'm all right. It's fine.
Okay. So let's see something like, okay, let's see children and young people if we want
Mhm.
to work on that.
Yeah.
So I'll stop sharing and then I'll share again just to make sure that it's in front of you. Okay. So what are the things that we can talk about on children? So there's a research project that sees social disadvantage, family support, and young people's mental health in the UK. So you don't need to see all the UK children within your within your project, but you can. So there's this link that I'll share with you. Actually, I'll share it with you in this chat. So you can just have a look at all the research projects that you can do. So within this, I'll just share it within the chat. So you can just have this with you. You can open it up and you can always see what research project would you want to work on. And then you can see cost of living, which has an impact on emotional support for young Londoners. So it's not only London that you would want to see. It could be somewhere where you were living in. You're living in Bolton, so you would want to see some impact over there. So that could be something that you would want to see. And then when we go into the project, it gives you actually all the supplementary things that can be done over there. So if you want to contact the person who's worked on this project, you can always have a contact which is given there. So you can know what they've used, what type of questionnaires they've used, all sorts of things. So yeah, and if we go back, I hope you can keep seeing my screen. Anytime it goes blank or you can't see it, please let me know. And then we can see, for instance, if we want to work on mental health, which attracts me a lot. Again, if towards the left side, you have your research projects if you want to click on this. So if you don't click on this, it won't give you a research project. You would want to click on your research project. Otherwise, it gives you 198
Topics, man.
198 topics, which you don't want. You actually just want to go and do a research project. So you click on this on your research project. Why isn't it coming? Yeah. So it gives you just 13 research projects, and this is how you can actually work on. So there's one where it understands the impact of income and welfare policy responses to COVID-19 on inequalities in mental health. It doesn't have to be so complex. It can be very, very simple. For instance, this is very simple, I think. Causal effects of alcohol and mental health problems on employment outcomes. You could not do alcohol, probably you could do anything else. You could do maybe you could do something on smoking, because alcohol and smoking goes hand in hand. But the impact of alcohol, I think, is much more on employment and mental health problems compared to just smoking. And then you can see efficiency, cost, and quality of mental care provision within your sector wherever you're working. So these are some topics that you can have a look at and then discuss it with your supervisor and see what feedback they have to give you. Just another quick search I'll do with you. Yeah, this is the same. These are the same topics. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just share my screen again. So that's how you think about what research project would you want to do. So the research project template, if I show you this, just make it bigger for you. So if you would want to do a research project, so your name would be here. Just let me turn on my annotation. Yeah. So your name, the template that will be given to you would have your name and your title here. So for instance, there's your tutor who's named themselves over here, just to give you an example. So you'll give your name here. You'll talk about the title or the topic, and you'll talk about, for instance, the topic is what makes us healthy, and it's an introduction to the social determinants of health. So you have several physical, mental determinants of health. You have social determinants of health also. So what is your role within the organization? How are you linked to your proposed topic of research? And the student has mentioned that as a student researcher, I have chosen the topic of what makes us healthy. And this is going to be the area of research that I wish to undertake for the completion of my unit assignment. State the aims and objectives of your research. So this, you'll be giving that over here. Your objectives would be, so your aim is you want to see whether social determinants play a role in the individual's health and lifestyle. This is your question or your aim that you want to see. Your objective is, why is good health important? You want to see that through your project. What influences health and what can bring about change in the health and social care system. The purpose of your research is, you'll have 30 to 50 words to give within your background. Now, what is important here is to understand that the different sections that have been given different word counts. So if you remain within that word count, your life is going to be easier. That is how you don't go beyond that word count, which will then obviously take off marks from your final project. So you would have to be within your limits, and to do that, you would have to follow the guide that has been given to you regarding your research project. What is evidence-based practice? So evidence-based practice, so it is a process that is used to review. As I said yesterday, whatever you're going to do, it is always going to be based on evidence. So what evidence is there out for that research that you're doing, what that you're interested in? If that's been evidenced so much that you don't need to do more research, like for instance, Smoking causes lung cancer. We already know that. What is it that you're adding new to it? So you would want to go through evidence and then see what new project would you want to do. So it's a process used to review, analyze, and translate the latest scientific evidence. And the goal is to quickly incorporate the best available research. So you have research there, but what is the best available research along with clinical practice and patient preference into the clinical picture, a practice, so nurses can make informed patient care decisions. It could be nurses, it could be doctors, it could be pharmacists like they're working now with the NHS. So EBP or evidence-based practice is the cornerstone of clinical practice. So it requires that decisions about healthcare based on the best available practice that's current, that is valid, that is relevant. These decisions would be made by those receiving care, informed by the tactic and explicit knowledge of those providing care within the context of available resources. Okay, so what is evidence-based practice? How would you be involved in it? So if you're working in an interprofessional team, you'll inquire about some practice. And what is the practice that you're questioning? For instance, if it's hand washing, just as simple as hand washing, what evidence do you have on hand washing required to, for instance, alleviate problems or to prevent certain health conditions? How does that translate into, is that better translating into better health or better surgical outcomes, for instance? And then you're going to reflect on this practice. You're going to constantly learn through this practice and reflect through this practice. And based on this practice, what are the best practices that you have seen? So for instance, you have certain practices. What are the best practices that are being used? So those practices have a chance of, do they have a chance of improvement? You're going to reflect back and then ask yourself. So this is how you get involved in best practice, evidence-based practices. So what evidence is there that a certain practice makes a certain change? This is how you would go about, and then this is through research, proper research that you will be involved in, proper inquiry that you will have to do. So ethical, and then there are certain ethical considerations that are there within your research. So there are a set of principles that would guide your research design and practice. These principles would include voluntary participation, informed consent, anonymity. So what is voluntary participation? Claude, if I ask you, any idea what is voluntary participation? Any idea? So we
So
have
which question?
voluntary, yeah, we
Which
have
question?
voluntary. What is voluntary participation? Any idea?
No.
No. Okay, so voluntary participation means that you're not forcing someone to participate in your study. So if
Okay.
you want people to participate in your study, they can voluntarily be involved within your study. They can exit your study at any point in time. If they don't want to be part of the study, it's okay. It's okay for them not to be part of your study. They're not going to be forced. It's not going to be involuntary. It's not going to be forced upon them that you have to participate in the study. Otherwise, for instance, you're not going to get this, or we're going to give you healthcare coupons, for instance, or you're going to get certain benefits from this research. No, it should be voluntary, that if a person wants to join your research, it's okay. If they don't want to join it or they want to exit your research at any time, it's up to them. Informed consent. Now, what does informed consent means? It means that they have given you their consent to be a part of your research after they have been informed about everything within that research. So if there's a vaccination that you want to try, they have been informed about that vaccination. I'm just giving an example. Obviously, you would not want to go for a vaccination strategy. That's not possible. But then they have been given, for instance, let me give you a simpler and a more understandable example. So, for instance, if you want to, um, interview certain patients, what would that interview have within it? Set of questions that you would be adding in that questionnaire. How much time will it be required for them to complete that interview? Would it take too much time, or do they have any benefits of joining this research? Would they be informed about something that they did not know about earlier? Or would there be any harm that there would be within that research? So everything has to be informed to them, and then they give their consent. That could be a written consent for those who can write and read, or it can be a verbal consent who can just give their verbal consent, and they can just they can't speak, for instance, or they are unable to sign for any reason. Give their signatures. Anonymity is that whenever you're doing a research, you don't want that person doesn't want themselves to be highlighted within that research. They don't want their names out for whatever reason, or they don't want their pictures out there in that research. So that means they want to remain anonymous. Confidential means the same. Potential for harm, again, is there any harm that could happen because of being a part of this research or not being a part of this research? And how would this research be communicated? How would the results of this research be communicated to the wider society? So scientists and researchers must always adhere to a certain code of conduct when collecting data from others. You have a certain list of how to do, what to do, and you cannot go otherwise. You can't work otherwise apart from those strict guidelines. So they're very strict. You have to adhere to them. These considerations protect the rights of research participants, enhance research validity, maintain scientific integrity. Research ethics, they're actually they matter for research in scientific integrity, because you're going to publish your research, which is going to be used in wider sectors. So you need to make sure that these principles you're adhering to, and they are informed. Your participants are informed. It's a voluntary and safe research that you're conducting. I hope that's clear, Claude. These points that I've just talked to you about. If anything is, if it's ambiguous or you want more clarity on any other point, please let me know. And then there's a timeline in an essential tool. So you need to have a timeline. So when does your research project get approved? What time are you anticipating for? That timeline can be changed, but it's highly recommended that it's not changed and it remains the same throughout your research project. And these timelines would make it easier for students to understand what events are taking place in a timely manner. So you need to know your starting and your end date of your project. It's important that these milestones are achieved. Should also make sure that there is a reference to the events that you include in your timeline in your project description. So for instance, if I want to make a timeline over here, so your timeline, you might have a timeline for Jane, let's say. Your total project hours might be 350. It's a work week, Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So how many weeks? 35 hours per week for 10 weeks. I will have weekly lab meetings with my advisor to track progress and troubleshoot any major issues. Will also be consulting regularly with graduate students in the lab working on related projects. Sorry. So you can make this just as this is. So your week dates might be mentioned over here. Your hours might be mentioned over here. So what are you doing within this week? So your first week, so for instance, you're training on new microscope, you're synthesizing experimental samples with varying ratios using multiple synthesis approaches. You're in the second week, you're characterizing samples using X-ray diffraction. This is a lab-based study. So they're giving different timelines. They've given a timeline example where they've incorporated vacation also. So you need to be really realistic. So you need to make sure if you have kids, you can't work beyond 5 p.m. For me, I have kids. I can't work on weekends. This is just one class that I can take half an hour or 1 hour max. I can't leave my kids. I have to be realistic. I work full time. I get off at 3 o'clock. I have to be with my kids. There's no other support. So I'm just giving an example. So if I'm doing a project, I have to be realistic. I can't work beyond these hours because these hours are there for whatever personal use you have. So this has to be mentioned. You need to mention this also. So again, I'm stressing upon this thing that don't consider this project just as a one-time thing. Just think about what if you're doing a bigger project later on. What would you do when you need that understanding, this understanding of how to do a project, so that when you're doing it next and you're doing it at a larger scale, what would be the necessities that you would have to follow. So what are the different steps in your project? So the first one is assess the patient. So start with the patient, determine a clinical problem or a question that arises from care of the patient. Let's say it's excess waiting hours or it's infection control, let's say. Ask a focused clinical question. So you construct a well-built clinical questions derived from a certain case. So that is your asking. You want to acquire evidence on this question in order to answer this question. So what is your evidence base? What evidence do you have about infection control or whatever you want to, or about waiting times, or let's say about beds not being empty for the next patient? You want to appraise the quality of the evidence. So what is the evidence there within your clinical practice? So you want to see evidence that has been published before on based on basically this topic that you want to research. How valid is it and how applicable is it? Can you use it within your section, within your sector where you're working? How valid is it? Is it close to the truth? Are you making assumptions or is it true actually, whatever you're researching or whatever your findings are? And then apply the evidence to the patient care. So return to your patient, integrate the evidence from within the clinical practice and patient preferences, apply it to practice. And then at the end, you evaluate the patient's outcome and your own performance. So this is a way how you can do your research. So what is the aim of your research? So aims and objectives have to be defined in a specific way. There's specific terminologies that you can use while you're talking about your aims and objectives. So what is a research aim? It shows you the purpose or your main goal of a project. So it helps your reader to understand what are you focusing on in your research, gives them idea of what you're trying to accomplish. So research aims, they're found in your own subsection under your, so once you're done with your introduction, your background of your research, and later on your research would then show your aims and your objectives. So in most situations, a research aim is expressed as a broad statement of the main goal of your study and doesn't need to be more than one sentence. It should be explicit. The exact format of the outline will vary depending upon your preference, but it should explain all your purpose, your objective, and how you plan to accomplish this project or this aim. So your research aim could have 3 parts, for instance. Why is this research necessary? What is the purpose of this study? How will you accomplish it? So for instance, I want to see the waiting hours of patients. Why is it necessary? Because of patient turnover or because of increased seriousness of other patients. What is the purpose of this study? This is what I want to see. I want to see the purpose is to see the waiting hours, how excessive are the waiting hours, what impact does it have on the other patients or the same patient, and how will you accomplish it? I might use questionnaires, I might use certain other strategies to see how much does it take to for the next patient to attend the clinic or the GP to see the next patient. Now comes your research objectives. So the aims and objectives are quite similar. And what you have to use is that you have to use SMART objectives. So your research aim would define what your study is going to answer, but your research objectives outline how you're going to answer. So your how goes into your objectives. So if your research objectives, if you've written them, they should have a SMART objective. So your specific, SMART is a mnemonic given for specific. So it's your research, is your action or your research that you intend to take unclear, or is it focused and well defined? Is your, for instance, I'm working on waiting time where? Is it in the GP clinic? Is it in the accident and emergency section? Where is it that I'm seeing my research? Is it specific enough? One point that is missing is measurable. How are you going to measure? Or accessible. So SMART can be, so measurable can be interchanged with accessible. So what method are you using to measure your goal? So how are you measuring waiting time of the patients? Obtainable, or it's also called achievable. So do you so SMART? So SM, specific, measurable, achievable, can also be obtainable. So do you have the necessary support? Do you have the resources? Do you have the funding? Do you have the time? Do you have the team to work on your project? Relevant, does your research that you want to do, does it support the achievement of your aims, of your research aims? So you're wanting to see waiting hours, but your research does not show that. Is it relevant? So you have to be guided by your aims. Time bound. Are you finishing within the given time period, or are you taking a year to finish? A year would not be feasible, obviously, within your unit, obviously. So SMART is a very good way: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic or relevant, and time bound. Understanding the difference between research objectives and aims. So your aim would focus on what a research proposes to achieve, and your objective focuses on how. So it shows the how of your project. The research objectives are more specific than the research aim. So your research aim will just be one-liner. It will be a one-liner. Your research objectives will be more than one line or one sentence. Your objective focuses on short-term and immediate outcomes, while your aim is your goal. It's a longer-term outcome. What is at the end of the project? What do you want to see? It would be best to write an objective as a numbered list, and your research aim can be written as one sentence, or a short paragraph could also do. Now talking about research ethics. Just a minute. Yeah, just 3 more slides. So, ethics is defined as, it's taken from a Greek word which means ethos. It means customs or character. So, it is very important that you maintain your ethics within your research. So, it understands if there's any conflict arising from any reason because within your research. It deals with what choices can be made. So if the patient doesn't, if your participants, are they joining voluntary or is it involuntary that they're joining? It tells about what problems can arise from your research and how are you going to minimize those problems to the best of your ability. Ethical considerations in research are a set of principles that would guide your research design and practices. These practices include voluntary participation. We've talked about this, informed consent, anonymity, confidentiality, potential for harm, and results or communication. So, we've talked about this already. So, your ethical issues of informed consent of harm. So you will want to talk about what harm is there. If there's a person, what harm would there be if they're joining this research? Uh, is there information going to be confidential or are you going to share it? If you're going to share it wide, would their names be used? Would you use certain other identifiers? Would you use only numbers and not ID numbers? Like you could assign ID numbers and not specify their names. Would they be anonymous? And any conflict of interest. So you might have conflicts of interest arising. So for instance, your supervisor doesn't have any conflict of interest. So you would have to specify if they have any or not. This is just an example. So within your research, ethics is very important. So you would want to show conflict of interest. For instance, if you're working in the NHS, different people might have some conflicts of interest. So you have to mention those. There are guidelines proposed for standardized ethical practice throughout the globe. The 4 fundamental principles of ethics are they basically autonomy. That means whatever the patient or the participant, um, whatever you're using, whichever patient or participant you're using within your research, they are autonomous. They can leave the project at any time. They don't want to give you they don't want to comment on a particular topic. It's up to them. They don't want to answer the question at any time. It's up to them. So it's all autonomy towards them. Non-maleficence means, are they going to be harmed in any way? You would have to mention that there is no harm, or there it is non-maleficent. Beneficence, what is the benefit of joining your research? Are they getting paid for your research? Are they which they should not be, obviously, because otherwise the research becomes biased. Are they going to have certain benefits like having a whole health checkup, for instance? What is it? If there's no benefit of joining this research, you would have to mention that. And then justice. Are you doing justice? Are you taking people equally? Are they treated equally within your research project? So these are the main ethical concerns. Do your SWOT analysis. So this is the last slide for today. So what is SWOT analysis? It's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We've talked about this yesterday. This is very important. So how do you want to see within your research project? List all your, so it's done in a 2x2 table. So you have SWOT. So it's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So within your research project, how would you identify the strengths? So what to do well, what makes you stand out from your competition or your competitors? What advantages do you have over other businesses? What relevant resources do you have? This can be anything. So for instance, what do you do well? You have loyal people working, you are hardworking and committed, your employees are hardworking and committed, you have abundant financial resources. These can be your examples. What are your weaknesses? So for instance, you might have lack of funding or capital. You may have low profit margins. You may have ineffective systems. Sorry. You have very narrow product time. What are your opportunities? List all of them. For instance, you have lack of competition. You're the only one working within your project. You don't have any competition there. You have within your project, there are demands for your offering. You have market growth. You have good economy boom. What are the threats? So you might have new competitors with lower prices that are offering the same project or the same product. You have high attrition rates. There might be people who are leaving your project, negative press reviews. You have price wars, you have calamities. So involve all the threats that you can analyze or you can think about. I'll just share this. Let me just see if that's about it from my side. Someone has just joined, Josephine. So from my side, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm just trying to PDF, okay. Any questions?
Oh yeah, I'm alright. No question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, please let me know. Yeah, I'm happy to answer them. We'll be here next week, so next weekend actually. So please let me know if you have any questions. The recordings will be out on Monday, so yeah, you'll have these recordings then, and then you can have a look at them if you don't understand a certain topic or you want more clearance on it. I'm happy to do that. Okay.
That will
So
finish it for now.
yeah, so this is all that you can have as your have a look at these resources. They're very helpful in understanding how to do your project. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's it about from my side. Yeah. So I wish you have a nice weekend. And take care of yourself. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Take care. See you next
See you.
weekend. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.